It's been a long journey. Over the past 6 months, I've managed to play through all 9 titles in the Trails series, and if you ask me, it's been worth every second. Trails of Cold Steel 4 is the latest in this amazing series and finally concludes the Erebonian Arc. The game is scheduled for release on the PS4 in just a few days and sometime next year on the Switch and PC. And in case you're wondering, yes, there is a massive requirement to play the first 3 Cold Steel games first. I can't even imagine how confusing it would be playing through this with no context of the characters, world, and events. Fortunately, all of the games are awesome, so you should definitely check them out if you haven't already. Playing the Sky Trilogy and the Crossbell Arc first is also highly recommended if you want a complete understanding of everything, but it's certainly not a requirement. This review is going to be as spoiler-free as possible, with the footage coming from both the official promotional trailers and from about the first 10 or so hours of gameplay. I would also like to thank NIS America for providing me with a review code for this incredible game. Before we get into it, if you liked this review, it would help me out a lot if you hit like and also sub for loads more Trails and RPG content. I've now got a review up for every Trails title, so feel free to check them out if you're interested. Alright, let's get into it. Cold Steel 3 ended on a massive cliffhanger, the kind of cliffhanger that just stops mid-scene, leaving you with loads of questions, wondering what's going to happen. Upon starting Cold Steel 4, it soon becomes immediately clear that Erebonia is not in a good place. The dark and depressing tone is a result of the upcoming war with the Kelvard Republic and some other unnatural events that I'm not going to spoil for you. This is essentially what Cold Steel 4 is about, preventing a massive war which will no doubt lead to unfathomable consequences. The first portion of the game puts you in the shoes of the new Class 7 who have taken refuge in the home of the Hexen clan. I've always wondered what this place would be like, and now we know. Where Thor's Academy acted as the hub in CS1 and 3, the village begins as CS4's main hub. Here, Una, Kurt, Altina and Randy team up, departing on missions to locate other class members of Class 7, including Reen, whose whereabouts is a complete mystery. As you progress through this very lengthy game, the focus will eventually be on stopping the war, and during this time the game opens up a lot more, allowing you to freely explore selected locations, just like in Cold Steel 2. Most of these locations are the same as what was presented in Cold Steel 3, but there are quite a few new ones too. As the narrative is such a key component in experiencing Trails games, that's all I'm going to say about the finer points of CS4's story. In terms of its quality, as with all of the Trails games, it has its highs and lows, with its highs being absolutely incredible fist-pumping moments which are among the best in the entire series. However, it also has its lows. I'm talking about the padding made up of hours and hours of side quests and other content that doesn't really impact the main story. This content is dedicated to building the incredible world and fleshing out the characters, and if you've played the series, you'll know what I'm talking about here. I also need to mention the incredible soundtrack, which was by far my favourite in the Cold Steel series. The peaceful town tunes to the exciting boss battle themes, it is consistently great. The voice acting is exactly what you would expect. These voice scenes are great to watch, but due to the insane amount of dialogue, you will still be doing a lot of reading. And like I pointed out in my other Cold Steel reviews, the scenes that have a mix of both voice acting and written text are still in abundance, and this often stopped me from fully immersing myself into the moment. As a whole, Cold Steel 4 was a very satisfying conclusion to the Erebonian Arc, however, it's far from the end of the Trails series. There are still multiple other arcs set to expand this amazing world and continue some of the plot threads that have been present in all of the Trails games so far. The next one is Hajimari no Kiseki, and personally, it's a strange feeling having to wait for a Trails game, considering I just binged on all 9 of them throughout the year.
I come before you all today to announce the War Council's decision. We will punish the Republic of Calvard for their crimes and subjugate them under the might of the Empire.
The hour will be upon us soon. We will begin the greatest military operation in Erebonian history. Operation Jormungand.
I think we can all agree that the Trails series has no shortage of awesome characters. Cold Steel 4 is the pinnacle of the series in this area, and seeing all of my favourites from the Sky series and the Crossbell Arc make an appearance was one of my favourite things about the game. At times, it honestly feels like everyone plays a role in some form or another, and this clear dedication to servicing its fans made playing all of the other games so worth it. I mean, it's not essential that you spend over 400 hours playing the Sky and Crossbell games, but it will be so rewarding if you have. I also found a new appreciation appreciation for the new Class 7, and each one of these characters are given more time in the spotlight, and they shine. All Class 7 also play an important role, and at one point or another they will be required characters in your party. In fact, the roster of available party members that you can choose to take out on your missions is massive. And I'm not just talking about those from old Class 7 either, there are also a load of unexpected additions, and this was awesome. Bonding events also make a return, where if you reach 5 stars with a character, you can activate a special scene with them at the end of the game. What's new this time, however, is the romance points that you can accumulate with specific female characters. Honestly, Rin is such a bloody playboy. How one man as clueless as he can have so many women drooling over him, it's just unbelievable. And for the record, Team Alyssa all the way. Cold Steel 4's turn-based combat is almost exactly like Cold Steel 3, which is a very good thing. There aren't too many new mechanics here, but I'm fine with that considering we were already given loads of strategic options in Cold Steel 3. One new minor addition is that we now have more Brave points that can be spent on orders, which was a nice change, but it didn't really impact the gameplay too much. Lost Arts also make a return from Cold Steel 2, and these can be obtained by defeating optional bosses hidden around the world. These optional bosses are available fairly early in the game and can be challenged then or later on when you characters are a bit stronger. Finally, your characters of Class 7 can also spend a load of EP on summoning the mech in battle. From a story perspective, it makes sense that this should happen, but I never really used them in combat. I think the most significant change, however, is the balance in the difficulty, which I found to be a huge problem in the previous Cold Steel games. In Cold Steel 2 and 3, for instance, I could become an absolute powerhouse very early on, which took a lot of fun out of the awesome combat systems. It is clear that Cold Steel 4 attempts to address this issue by toning down the power of Brave Orders, equipment, and Master Quartz. For instance, the Evergreen accessory, which used to provide a 15% evasion bonus, is now at only 10%, and changes like this make it much more difficult to create the perfect evasion tank. Ultimately, the mass nerfing of just about everything made for a higher proportion of challenging, enjoyable battles that actually required some level of brain power. I do have an issue here though, in that I felt the break mechanic was nerfed way too much. With some enemies, you could spend loads of time trying to break them, then when you finally do, they unbreak themselves during the very next turn, which also resets the entire gauge. This makes everything that you've worked for literally pointless and made the whole break mechanic a far less viable strategic option. I felt that this system was in desperate need of some tweaking. It also wouldn't be right if I didn't mention the mech battles. These are basically the same as Cold Steel 3, so don't expect anything new here. It's always good to battle in these massive machines, but after all of these games, I really wish they did more to the upgrade mechanics, as you're still limited to only being able to equip 3 basic quartz. The RPG growth mechanics are almost exactly like Cold Steel 3, except now you can upgrade your slot levels like in Cold Steel 2. If you're unfamiliar, each character can equip 7 quartz that provide arts to use in battle, as well as stat upgrades and other passive skills. You can also obtain rare and super rare quartz that are much more powerful but require your slots to be upgraded. I've always liked this system as it allows for loads of options, and the feeling of getting a new rare quartz is always exciting. It's also really good to start the game with all 7 of your basic slots unlocked. I'm looking at you, Cold Steel 3. Then we have Master Quartz, which plays a huge role in building your characters. This time, their passive skills aren't quite as powerful, and this helps create a more balanced difficulty. One of the most significant additions to Cold Steel 3 was the Sub Quartz. This time, they're back. However, the limits on equipping these have been removed, meaning that anyone can equip the same Sub Quartz if they wanted. Personally, I prefer the limitations in Cold Steel 3, as this encouraged greater experimentation with different Master Quartz in the sub slot. The Trail Chests of old also make a return. These chests will initiate a battle if specific members are present in your party, and I always had a great time fighting through these, as it encouraged me to use characters that I otherwise may have neglected. The best part is that completing these chests will upgrade the power of your Brave Orders, which is a great incentive to find and complete every one of them. Now, Trails games are long, and Cold Steel 4 is no exception. A lot of the time will be spent reading through character dialogue and working through side quests, and this is all part of the experience. However, Cold Steel 4 also manages to hit a series high when it comes to minigames, and these manage to steal hours of my time. The best example of this is the Vantage Master card game. Now, this is the same excellent card game that you played in Cold Steel 3, but this time it's been tweaked for the better. A big part of its improvement is that it's now actually a challenge, mainly due to the fact that you start with really weak cards. There are also loads of new cards, and this made it worth experimenting and building different decks. I had one focused on the Heaven element, one for ranged, and one that built around the Bard Master card, which could seal enemy actions. Once you beat an opponent, you can also re-challenge them on hard mode, and this gets you extra U materials needed for upgrading equipment. However, I never actually saw the difference in difficulty between hard and normal. In addition to Vantage Master, there's also a couple of other minigames taken straight from Zero and Azure. Pom Pom Party is a puzzle game that requires you to match colors and use special abilities to last longer than your opponent. You'll slowly unlock more and more opponents as you progress through the game, and I had a lot of fun with this, even though I wasn't really good at it. After completing 9 excellent games through hundreds and hundreds of hours of gameplay, I kind of feel lost with what to do with myself. Cold Steel 4 was a great way to end the Erebonian Arc, and honestly, it had everything that I wanted from the Cold Steel finale. As you would expect, while slow at times, the story is excellent and provides some absolutely incredible moments which are among my favourite in the entire series. We also have a massive roster of brilliant characters, and seeing my favourites from all of the other Trails arcs was a standout for me. I also found the soundtrack to be the best out of all of the Cold Steel games, and I'll be pumping these tunes through my speakers as soon as I can. A special shout out also goes to the Vantage Masters card game, which is even better than it was in Cold Steel 3. I also really appreciated the more balanced gameplay, which created more battles that were actually challenging. If only the break system wasn't tweaked to be so useless. My only other issue is something consistent with all of the Cold Steel games, and that is the scenes that have a mix of voice acting and written text. I really hope they address this in future Trails games. So, is Cold Steel 4 my favourite in the series? Well, that's like asking which of your children is your favourite, which wouldn't really be a problem for me considering I only have one child, who is definitely my favourite. But if I had to, I would say that this is my favourite Cold Steel game, and it's definitely up there with Sky SC. It looks like I'll have to do a ranking video soon, so stay tuned for that. This was Hellfire RPGs, thanks for watching. Are you excited for Cold Steel 4? Let me know in the comments. If you like this, hit like and sub for more RPG and Trails content. Also, come say hi on the socials. See you next time.